Hi guys, it's Charles and welcome to Good Clinical, a podcast and YouTube channel dedicated to showcasing the future of medicine and human health. Today's podcast episode is another in our partnership with Te Titoki Mataora, the MedTech Research Translator. Today's episode, I am joined by the founder and clinical director, as well as the CEO of a company called Swaltech. This is Emma Hayes and Maggie-Lee Huckabee. So Swaltech is a medtech company based in New Zealand developing a solution for dysphagia. So welcome to the podcast, the both of you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So we mentioned before we got rolling, well, I mentioned rather before we got rolling that I wasn't aware of the clinical problem that is dysphagia. Would you mind providing us and the listeners with a quick overview of the scale of this problem and some of the clinical peculiarities thereof?
Sounds like that's your domain.
Okay, I'll take them. So dysphagia refers to a disorder in the ability to safely eat and drink. And so you're not able to go to the pub with your mates and have a beer. You can't have a Christmas dinner. You can't have birthday cake without being at risk of food going into your lungs and causing a chest infection. So it's a disorder that is unseen, but it's not at all uncommon. It occurs quite frequently following stroke. About half of patients who have had a stroke will have swallowing problems. About half of them will have food that goes into their lungs. It's also quite common with Parkinson's disease. And in fact, some studies would say that nearly all patients with Parkinson's disease will ultimately develop swallowing problems with survival. Those are two populations that I historically have worked the most with, but it also follows kids with cerebral palsy associated with dementia, motor neuron disease, Huntington's disease, head and neck cancer. The list just goes on and on and on. So it's a disorder you can't see that someone can't swallow, but many, many people can't swallow.
What kind of prevalence are we talking about? How many people in New Zealand or globally suffer from this issue?
Yeah, well, based on our research, we've seen sort of across some of our target markets, so New Zealand, Australia, Europe, and the US, there's about 1.2 million new dysphagic patients every year, and they're served by about 125,000 clinicians.
And that's only dysphagia due to stroke and Parkinson's.
Yes.
That doesn't even include everybody else. It's only those two.
Right. So is the true prevalence of dysphagia probably not fully characterized, shall we say, to put it mildly?
Exactly.
That's probably well summarized. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. And why is that? Has there not been enough interest in this arena? It's not enough of a clinical need. It's too hard to diagnose. It's too varied. You mentioned a whole bunch of primary diagnoses that often run off into dysphagia. Is that it's just too multifaceted?
I think that's part of it. I think, dysphagia following stroke looks very different than dysphagia with Parkinson's and with cerebral. It all looks very different, and within an etiology, the prevalence is quite different. And so trying to get a single figure for that proves to be very challenging. It's also a relatively new area of practice. When I started clinically, which granted was a very long time ago, but when I started clinically, nobody really worked in dysphagia. That wasn't really a thing. When people couldn't swallow, they just put a tube in their stomach to give them food, and that was the end of it. And of course, now we know that there are a lot of things that you can do to turn the problem around if you do focused intervention.
I see. Interesting. Okay, so say I'm patient X. I've been recently diagnosed with Parkinson's. I'm starting to have trouble swallowing, and I present that to my physician. What would be the normal clinical intervention or clinical route that such a patient would take as a standard of care?
I think patients with Parkinson's disease, that if you are first diagnosed, you may not be having swallowing problems, but as they start to develop, then your physician, usually a neurologist, would refer you to a speech and language therapist, who then would do an evaluation of your swallowing and come up with a treatment plan. Now, Parkinson's disease is a progressive disease. Many of those patients the treatment plan would consist of learning to compensate for the problem and maybe some muscle strengthening. So I think we're developing all new treatments that are trying to challenge the central nervous system to function differently. And so what we're learning is that in Parkinson's disease, you can, even though it's a progressive disease, you can improve swallowing, or you can at least prolong good swallowing, as long as the patient has active intervention.
Interesting. So is this really, and it's an issue of the brain, not necessarily the muscles involved. So is it that the muscles that are involved in swallowing are not getting the right, shall we say, signals from the brain, whether it be because of Parkinson's, other neurodegenerative diseases, or a stroke, for example? It's that signal's not getting there. So we have to find a new way of getting that signal to the right muscles.
Did my job for me. That's about it. That's exactly.
Sorry, we done, yeah. That's us.
Top of the class of one. Oh,
yeah, there you go. There you
so
go.
So
but the brain has to tell the nerves and the muscles what to do. And so if the brain isn't doing that, then it doesn't travel down the pathway to produce swallowing that works.
Right. It's a bit like when, you see those sci-fi type interventions where, say, a patient has lost an arm and they have a kind of bionic arm, and they attach electrodes to different muscles that previously had nothing to do with, say, extending or flexion or extension of the arm. It might be like in the chest or in the shoulder or something, and all of a sudden that new pathway has been set. The brain's comfortable with it, and now you have this arm that is working from part of your pectoral muscle, for example. Okay.
The other
That's really cool.
So the other cool thing is just, I don't come from a swallowing background, so this, like you, Chaz, is like all pretty new to me, and I didn't think about it until I met Maggie-Lee and kind of went, why don't more people care about this? But one of the things I've sort of learned through this journey is actually, particularly after a stroke, the fact that you can rehabilitate a swallow is quite cool. So maybe you could talk to that about how it innervates the nerve from both sides.
Yeah, I think that most people, if you think about swallowing, you think it's a reflex. How can you change a reflex? If a reflex is gone, it's gone. I think our early research suggested that might have been true, but now we know that swallowing is much more than reflex and requires a lot of cortical input, the top of the brain. And so the top of the brain, just as you might learn to play the piano or learn a difficult sort of speech, if you were an auctioneer and you're having to learn how to speak really quickly or learn how to speak at all, you're essentially getting the brain to reprogram the muscles to do things differently. When we look at arms and legs, the right side of the brain controls the left arm. The left side of the brain controls the right arm. It's a crossed pathway. The really cool thing about swallowing is that both sides of the brain control almost all the muscles required in swallowing. So there's a bilateral control. So that means if you mess up one side because you've had a stroke, well, we just have to teach the other side how to compensate for the side that you've damaged.
So there's like built-in redundancy in the system dedicated to this pseudo reflex, but also cortical control. Amazing. So that would make it a little bit more amenable to retraining than some other parts of the body that might be affected.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, isn't it?
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so problem is you've got difficulty with swallowing. It's a fairly unmet need, shall we say. There are opportunities there to retrain the brain or the signaling pathway. There's built-in redundancy that makes it a little bit easier. What is being done in this domain to make use of that science? Are there other we'll get to Swaltech very shortly, but are there other things on the market right now or interventions that are widely used? What does the market look like, or the landscape look like from a clinical perspective?
If you look now at specifically how people are using the brain to control swallowing, there are methods that use more invasive and more expensive approaches. You might have heard in other areas people using transcranial magnetic stimulation, where you stimulate the brain with magnetic pulse. It's pretty non-specific, but you stimulate the brain, and then by upregulating the brain, you hope to upregulate learning, relearning of that process. So there are a couple of different approaches that are key toward brain upregulation or neurological upregulation. What I've spent most of my career trying to do, and what's sort of given the start to Swaltech, is instead of having invasive and expensive equipment, can we have the individual upregulate their own brain through practice? So they practice, learn to do things differently, and that changes the way the brain is wired. So it might take a little bit longer, but then the effort is coming from the patient intrinsically. And so the gains that are made, one would anticipate, would really be stuck. I haven't played the piano since I was 8. I promise you, I could go up to a piano and play chopsticks and begin the begin very well. But that's because that's in my brain. It is part of my brain, hardwired. So that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So it's a bit like, playing the piano, learning to play the piano, as opposed to your brain being stimulated to play the piano. You probably don't know how to play it, but the stimulation still play the same notes. But in 5 years' time, you're not going to know how to play those notes later on. That's really quite cool. Okay, so again, clearly unmet need. There are some pretty invasive solutions currently available with that stimulation side of things. So enter Swaltech. So is this from research out of your lab, Maggie-Lee, and then we've spun this out to pursue a commercial and entrepreneurial endeavor?
Mm-hmm. I started my career clinically for about 18 years, and then I moved into academics and worked in academics, well, now for about 24 years. I'm dating myself. But as I work in academics and start looking at this whole skill-based approach to swallowing and retraining the brain through behavioral practice, it's all well and good that I can come up with research tools in the lab and prove effectiveness. But if I don't find any way to get that technology to patients and clinicians, then it's kind of a waste of a career. I haven't really made an imprint on the profession if I can't translate my knowledge to patients. And so that's where Swaltech has come from, was my attempt of, after having a clinical career and an academic career, it's like, well, okay, let's try this. Let's just move in and see if we can't commercialize what we've learned through clinical and research practice and get it out to patients for use. And that's where Emma comes in, because I don't know business. That's not my wheelhouse. Or product development is not what I know anything about. I know patients well, but the rest is on her.
Because the commercialization endeavor, requires both sides, right? And they don't always marry up within the same person, shall we say. You either got the scientific stuff down, or you need to partner up with someone, or you need to learn really quickly. And so Emma, what's your background, and how did you come to join this endeavor?
Yeah. Well, as you can tell by my accent, I'm originally from Ireland, and I moved to New Zealand for a year in 2012, and here we are 12 years later. Forgot to leave. So I studied biomedical engineering, and my first real engineering job was with a company in Christchurch called OSIS, who design and manufacture custom orthopedic implants. Did that for a while and realized actually my passion sort of lay in the project management side of things. So went and pursued that and ended up working with another medtech company based in Sydney. And through that learning, then really got into the regulatory and quality side. So all of the compliance things you need to bring a product to market, as well as getting heavily into sort of learning little bits about the business. And in about 2021, Maggie-Lee and I were introduced to each other, and I thought what they were doing was really cool. So we stayed in touch, and when the opportunity came in 2022, they had some money, so they decided to spend it on me, which I'm most grateful for. I initially joined their company as the Director of Regulatory and Quality, so to help establish that part of the strategy. And as time has gone on, well, I've just given about every role in the company a go. But I've taken that sort of project management, regulatory and quality and knowledge within the space to take on the CE role and bring things to the next level with great support from Maggie-Lee and our board.
Fantastic. Yeah, a formidable combination.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, wealth of knowledge from the commercial side and then the academic side and the clinical side working together. So talk me through the BiSSkapp, if I recall the acronym. What does that look like and what does it stand for? Shall we go with that to begin with?
You want that?
You start them off and I'll interject.
So BiSSkapp stands for Biofeedback in Strength and Skill Training. Now, way back in 1991, I published a manuscript using sEMG, something that detects muscle activity. Put them under the chin, and you can see a waveform on the screen. Back in 1991, we thought you couldn't change swallowing. You could only make muscles stronger. So I used this technology to teach people when the line goes higher, the muscles are contracting harder. So used it as a biofeedback device, published that as a tool, continued doing work in that area for quite a while. And then over the course of time, I thought, not everybody's weak. So why are we only doing muscle strengthening as a rehabilitation approach? Which then, paired with our understanding of how the brain controls swallowing, came up with this skill approach. And with the skill training approach, you put the electrodes under the chin, and then on a tablet, you see a little target box that hits the middle of the tablet. And you tell the patient, I want you to swallow and make the peak of the waveform go inside the target. So they're having to use the thinking part of their brain to control the timing and relative force generation of these muscles. And if you think about that, that's what you do when you eat. If you take water, you might swallow very quickly, but you don't have to put much effort into it because water just kind of knows where to go. But if you're swallowing a big old bacon double cheeseburger, it takes a little bit longer, and you have to swallow harder. So our normal ingestive process has variations in timing and force generation. So we're trying with this technology to teach patients to learn to control those aspects of swallowing. So we developed something called BiSSkapp, which was just the desktop software. It used a commercially available device. We developed that as a research tool. And at the request of clinicians, we turned it into BiSSkapp, with the added bonus of, if you will, a BiSSkapp is that it's intended for a patient to take it home so that he can do training every single day without having to come into the healthcare system to get that treatment. So a clinician in the hospital sets up the training and sends it home with the patient for him to do semi-independently.
Incredible. So are there electrodes that they would attach to their skin in the comfort of their own home?
That's right.
Oh, wow.
That's right.
Is it hard to get wrong, or is it easy to get wrong? Like place them in the wrong place, or
the device has been designed so that it's very intuitive. Yeah. So the patient picks up the electrode and sticks it under the chin, and it's very easy to place. They have to put a little sticky patch on it, but they put it under the chin, and then the electrode automatically connects with the tablet, and there's no on-off button that's fiddly. It just connects to the tablet. They push start, and they're off and running. And they're doing the treatment plan that their clinician has previously set up for that patient.
Oh, right. So they're not going off rogue and kind of
No.
practicing the wrong amplitudes and the wrong timing variations or whatever. It's a bespoke clinical kind of training
Absolutely.
program, shall we say.
Absolutely.
That's remarkable.
Purchase the technology, but we will tell them you can't use it unless you have a clinician to guide your treatment.
Yeah, because I was thinking, if there'll be some people that want to just go rogue and try to get their stats up as quickly as possible, but it might be leading them down the wrong path, shall we say, clinically. Excellent. That's really cool. So I suppose the alternative would be, again, that very invasive electrostimulation, which I presume has to be done in a clinician's office or under very strict settings, controlled environment, where this can be done. The BiSSkapp can be used on a daily basis or however frequent as required. And again, you're going back to that skill-based approach, actually training the brain through relearning, or how do you upregulating the brain activity. Yeah, that's really fantastic. Okay.
I suppose the other methods are, as you said, compensation, which would be like thickened liquids or PEG and things like that in the absence of having stimulation or BiSSkapp, right? So BiSSkapp is intended that they're proactively participating in their training and hopefully increasing their quality of life by being able to safely swallow and enjoy a beer or a double bacon cheeseburger. That's what they want to do.
And I love the biofeedback part of it, because I presume the module would incorporate where they're weak or where they're strong and to optimize the clinical pathway.
Yeah, it has a lot of bells and whistles. Do you want to talk about the voiceover?
Yeah, so one of the things that Maggie-Lee's communicated is really important is that, the patient is successful no matter where they're at in their sort of their journey in rehabilitation. So we have a setting in there that with the target, if they hit the target or miss the target X number of times, the target is going to change. So in the example of strength, we have to get it over a line. If they miss it consecutively 3 times, the line is going to move down. So the idea is that they're always succeeding and they're training for where they're at, because otherwise, like going to the gym, if you start deadlifting 60 kgs, but actually really you're only able for 20, it's going to be a bit disheartening. So that's sort of one feature we have. One of the other features we have, and we learned this through actually working alongside a patient usability group that we've established, is the value of clinician coaching. And what I mean by that is when we did our study, we had Maggie-Lee do your typical onboarding piece, and then we had them go away and take a break and then do their training. And it just was really valuable. So we started to think, how can we build that in? So we've now got the feature where a clinician can record their own voice and prompts for different parts of the training session. So for example, if it's at the start of the session, we could record, "Let's go, Charles." Or if you're successful, it'd be like, "Woohoo, go, Charles." You can personalize it, or you can have it generic, and you can assign those prompts to each patient, so they have that as an option to sort of help with motivation. And I think people are generally, we met with a patient today who tried the technology, and they were saying that actually it's quite uplifting to have that personalized piece.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I really love about this is that it kind of democratizes the intervention for dysphagia. If you're someone that lives in the far north or in a rural area and you don't often get out to see your doctor, or doctors aren't readily available, something like this, you don't have to go till you see your doctor, but you get that feedback, or that the information gets shared as part of your care. I think it's fantastic. It's all part of the move to more personalized, greater access, greater democratized, I guess is probably not the best word, but in that realm, I think it's fantastic. So where is Swaltech now in terms of the commercialization pipeline?
My eyes on me in terms of that's an Emma question. Yeah. So where we're at right now is we're sort of, in that last 20%, the 20% that's hardest to get over the line. So in terms of releasing, we're on track to release to the New Zealand market next month. From there, we're then looking to go into Australia, which will be towards the end of the year, early next year. And the goals around that is to just get people using the device, gather as much feedback as we can, because obviously people using it, generating that data is going to be really helpful. And then from there, we've got our eyes set on getting to the US. So we're already starting to plant the seeds over there as well.
Fantastic. And what kind of regulatory strategy is involved for an app-based intervention? Because that's different to is it a class 1 medical device? What's the...
I'll try and not make this really boring and techy. I just think about how you're talking in such a lovely, like, exciting way, and I'm like, right. So luckily for us, we've got a low risk medical device, because probably the bits, it's a tool. It's not exactly diagnosing anything. It's not telling you to do anything, and it's being prescribed. So the clinician is setting the settings rather than the technology telling them what settings it should be. So really then any risk that we have around the device is making sure it delivers its intended use, but also for that sensor that sits under the chin, we need to make sure that that's biocompatible, which means, it doesn't cause any irritation or sensitization to the skin, as well as the adhesive patch. So taking all of that into account, in New Zealand and Australia, we're considered a class 1 device, which is one of the lowest classes. So in New Zealand, there isn't a lot of regulation in place. In Australia, you have to produce a declaration of conformity and submit to what's known as the TGA, and then they might sample it, but typically they'll rubber stamp. And then going to the US, we're considered, in the US, they've got 3 classes. We're class 2, but it's exempt from having to put in any 510K notifications. So the regulatory process is, while the barriers are lower, it doesn't take away the amount of work that we need to do to make sure we show that it's safe and it delivers its intended use.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's really exciting. So New Zealand, Australia, and then the US, and then global domination promptly thereafter.
Yeah. Europe after that, because BiSSkapp, which Maggie-Lee spoke about, which was released as a research tool, it was then back developed so that it could be sold in Europe, Australia, and New Zealand. And even though they didn't advertise it, people came and found it, and they sold about 300 copies. So it's been hugely popular in Europe and the UK. So they're pretty excited about BiSSkapp. So we're keen to get into that market when we can.
Fantastic. And what's the business model approach? So I presume you'll be selling a more comprehensive module to the clinician, but an individual patient would also purchase an app, a consumer style app as well.
Sure. You happy for me to talk about that?
Yeah, please. Business model.
I know. So look, truthfully, we're still figuring out what exactly it will look like and how we'll package the whole thing together. But simply, BiSSkapp we've got a clinician web portal, which is effectively a web application, which is where the clinician goes, sets up their patients and manages them remotely. Then we've got what we call the patient kit, and effectively that's the mobile application that's downloaded, and then you have your wireless sensor, which comes with a charging dock and adhesive patches and all of that. So one option is we're selling to a health system where they might want to get access to the web app, but they'll also want to get some of these patient kits, and effectively they loan them out. So our patient app can be downloaded, but it's only activated once the clinician gives them a username and a password. And it can be used on Android or iOS devices as well. So for a lot of health systems, they typically have iPads that they loan out. Otherwise, if people are buying their own devices or they have them, that's an option too, and it can be loaned out. The other thing that Maggie-Lee spoke to is that patients can look to buy directly. So for example, Parkinson's patients are probably a really good example there, where you've got a neurodegenerative disease and they might want to buy something, keep it, and then just license the app from us again and work with their clinician. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's effectively, we're selling the hardware and licensing the apps.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, I'm curious as well about the clinical data that's required? So I presume, if you don't need, say, you want to say, well, Swaltech is X times more effective than the alternative and it's a lot safer, you might not need that in terms of registration, right, with MedSafe, TGA, but you would want that for claims, I suppose, efficacy claims or safety claims. Will you be doing any clinical research trials in the future?
Absolutely. So we've got at least 2 on the go right now. One's happening here at the University of Canterbury and the other is happening at the University of Florida. And we've had more researchers get in touch who are keen to use BiSSkapp in clinical trials. But you're absolutely right. We don't need clinical trials for the purposes of regulating the medical device. However, what we have right now is we've built out the health economics model, which looks at actually what is the cost of dysphagia right now in using the traditional care setting in New Zealand. But now we need to capture data for the BiSSkapp intervention so we can plug that back into the model and also to basically validate our claims or what we believe the benefits to be.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, it's exciting stuff. So if we were to fast forward 5 years into the future, where would you like Swaltech to be by then?
Great question. And great questions come great answers, right? So look, I think 5 years into the future, I think we'd like to see ourselves in our key markets and with the capturing key market share in our target population. So at the moment, we're targeting stroke, Parkinson's disease, head and neck cancer, some traumatic brain injury. One of the areas we're really interested into going into is pediatrics as well. So I think we have started on that. And I think, as you can probably appreciate, this is our kind of first roll of the dice with BiSSkapp. We've got so many ideas on how we want to iterate on it. So I think we'd probably be on Gen 3 or Gen 4 of the device. And if I was to tell you what that looked like, well, I could compromise our IP position, so I better not. But certainly, I think if to summarize in a sentence, it would basically become state of the art for dysphagia management. That's what success looks like in 5 years for us.
Yeah, fantastic. And what with these kind of things, with app based, you're collecting a lot of data. I presume you will have plans to invoke AI and various machine learning algorithms to optimize these treatments or these interventions over time, right? So, the more it gets used, the more data you capture, the more interrogation you can do of that data, and the more you can refine your algorithms or whatever you want to call them to make a better product. So this is exciting, very exciting stuff.
For sure, yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, well, this has been incredibly enlightening. I'm super pumped. I'm like excited. I'm not even involved in Swaltech or your research, but I'm like super enthused by it, which is testament to all the research that's gone into it over all those many years, Maggie-Lee. If people want to find out more about Swaltech or yourselves, where can they go?
Yeah, great question. They can head to our website, and actually we're about to launch the next version of our website. So it's quite simple. It's just Swaltech, SWALTECH.com. And they can hop on there. They can see all about all the different people involved, and they can shoot us an email or call us if they want to learn more.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. I will be eagerly awaiting for some updates on that global domination over the next few years. Thank you again for your time. Go away.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you.